Hello everyone, welcome back to another watercolour workshop, and this week I'm going to be painting these three little ducklings. So before I started, I tried out a few colours on a piece of scrap paper, mostly mixing yellows and browns to see what I could get, a few dark areas for the beak and the feet and so on. So my yellow is quite a vibrant zingy one, so I knocked it back with the addition of a tiny speck of brown, which in this case is quinacridrone gold. You can see there at the top of my palette in a little pan. And so I'm painting the whole of the duck apart from the dark bits with this yellow with a touch of brown in it. I'm painting wet onto dry. Once that's on, and then drop in some of the brown colour, the quinacridone gold. And I literally just touch the brush onto the wet paint and allow it to spread. These little spidery effects that you get. I go over the whole of the darker areas. I'm going to leave some yellow untouched on the tummy area and the cheek. And I'm just lifting a little bit out there where I think it's gone a bit heavy. I'm also lifting a little bit of yellow off the tummy area to give it a highlight. There I decided to add some fluffy texture. Used the end of the brush at first and then decided what's the point, I might as well just use the brush. It's a very fine rigger brush. So now on to the second one, the second duckling, and I repeat the process again. So start off wet onto dry with the basic yellow colour, a tiny touch of the brown in it. You might not have to do that, depends what your yellow is. And then the brown itself, the quinacridone gold, wet into it. Just drop it on and let it blend in, let it do its little spidery thing. And then again I adjusted where I thought it gone a bit too dark with a damp, clean brush to lift some of the paint out. And finally the background duck. Now I don't want this one to stand out as much, so I've slightly desaturated his colours with a tiny touch of blue. Which desaturates the yellow even more. You have to be very careful that you don't get a green. If that happens, you need to add some red. But basically you want a more neutral brown. He's meant to be a little bit blurred in the background. And rather than wait before I add these dark areas, I'm adding them now while he's still quite wet. So they all blend together, so it just looks more blurred, less defined. But he still gets a little bit of lifting out, a few highlights. Then I decided that I should blur him some more with a spritz from the bottle. Possibly got a little bit carried away here. Could have stopped here, but no, carried on. And yeah, a little bit over the top that. So I tried to rectify that with my tissue, my kitchen roll. So in hindsight, that's too many squirts. But never mind, let's carry on. So now, the darker areas on the two foreground ducklings. So I've mixed up some darker brown. So this is the quinacridone gold with a touch of blue or possibly Payne's grey into it. And it's wet, obviously, and I'm painting it onto the duckling, which is probably now at the damp stage. It's definitely not dry, and obviously it's not as wet because you can see the darker colour is staying where I put it. It's not spreading around. So it's dark into almost dry or damp. Wet, sorry, into almost dry or damp. Which means I've got some control and I can place it here, for example, under the cheek to give myself a shadow, but it's not going to spread into the cheek itself. I'm painting around the area at the beak, under the cheek, and all the stripy bits. And then where it's a shadow like this, I'm softening off the edge. Where it's not a shadow, like on the top of the head, I'm keeping the edge sharper and more defined. Now I'm just dragging the pigment down the body, down the tummy of the bird. Obviously, the further down I get, the less and less pigment there is. I get a kind of a variegated wash, but dry brush really. Another dark brown stripe here, or mid-brown. And then I'm strengthening those stripy areas and any other areas that I want to be extra dark. So this is another layer of the dark brown with probably some extra Payne's grey added. A little bit of spatter for some texture on the chest area. And then I'm going to repeat the process on the second duckling. So it's the mid to dark brown first layer, wet onto damp. Keep some edges sharp, but also soften some edges like there with the damp brush. So keep the stripy bits on his head as sharp as I can. Now my attention's been distracted by painting the feet. I thought, oh, I've got a nice brown here. I'll paint the feet while we're here. And I've missed softening the stomach area, the chest area. So that edge is starting to harden. So I spotted it and got my clean damp brush, just run it over the hard line, and it's gone. And I lifted out a few other areas as well to give myself some highlights. Next, I am painting in the final details on each of the ducks, starting with the one at the back. He's got a beak that is a mid-grey, I think, and I've taken some of it out with the side of the brush, the damp brush, and then some Payne's grey details with brown. So I don't want his details to be too distinct, but you can definitely see that he has a beak and a stripe on his face and some eyes. Whereas the ducklings in the foreground, this is the final stage of the painting where we paint all the details. I've got the beaks in two different darks, based around Payne's grey, one with some red to make it more brown. And then I'll lift off with the damp brush from basic highlights. So these areas are wet paint onto dry areas. These areas have not yet been painted, so they're still dry. I've got some good control here, and I can go in and add some paint, and it's not going to spread everywhere. The yellow areas are now pretty much dry, about 30 to 40 minutes in now. And so if I want to put some shadow in, I can do in here. I can put wet paint on top, and I can soften it off. I've put a shadow under the chin, which I'm now softening off. And I'm just lifting out any areas that look a bit rough, a bit hard-edged. And I'm adding some extra tone, some extra mid-brown to the face areas to make it more 3D. So it's not a flat area. It's got some texture, some tone to suggest the shape, reinforcing the dark of the beak, giving myself a few extra details to break up that highlight, strengthening the shadow under the chin, under the cheek, strengthening the area around the yellow stripe on his head so it stands out more. And extra layer on the inside of his foot. Okay, he's gonna be happy with that one. Second one, and I've got my clean dab brush and I'm just lifting out a little bit of the yellow around the eye. And then I'm going to paint some light mid-tone in the cheek area, again to give some definition to the shape of the head. We just soften that shadow there near the beak. We're almost done. Just going to soften the line again. Final touch, white watercolour onto the eyes, which are pretty much dry now. And there we have it. 3 little ducklings. Hope you enjoyed that and you found it useful, and you'll join me again next time. Thank you for watching.